Hello everyone and welcome to the Graveyard Shift where your nightmares become a reality. I'm your host Max Kellerhalls, and with me today we have another packed room, and for the third week in a row we have...
Sup, I'm Kris.
And new to the show we have...
Hi, I'm Knox.
And returning we have...
Shelldyn.
And back again...
Zach.
Nice to have you all back because we're about to get mentally fucked up with some psychological horror films.
More than we already are.
Yeah.
Whoa, yes, sir.
I picked a great room.
Yeah.
You picked the most medicated people you could.
Yeah.
Or
And
people
you went
who
with
need to be
that.
medicated.
We
Also,
all-
I'm sorry.
I'm new
Yeah.
medicated.
So I
I
will
am
say
medicated.
this: if you do have like certain triggers when it
Medication.
comes to like mental illness, and seek help as best as you can. We're going to be talking about some pretty taboo, hard subjects. Well, okay, the first film we're going to talk about for psychological horror films is we're going to be talking about The Shining. Now, this one is like known to be like, is it a ghost movie? Is it a psychological horror film? I tend to think of it as a psychological horror film, mostly
agree.
because it's about a man overcoming his addiction, or like an alcohol addiction.
Even if it's an addiction, it's still a movie about someone getting screwed up mentally and proceeding to cause harm, fear, whatever, to any close-by individual. Not just family, just any close-by individual.
Yeah, poor Scatman.
What is your definition of psychological?
Psychological or psychological horror?
Psychological
Just the word
horror, like,
psychological.
it plays with like the psyche of particular characters, either the main character or other characters around it. So, in this case of The Shining, well, okay, let's talk about the plot. Basically, Jack Torrance and his family are being tasked with watching over this hotel for the winter because no one else will be able to do it. Problem is, the last person that was the watchman over the hotel pretty much like butchered and killed his family while he was in this hotel. So they're pretty much like, okay, be warned. This hotel has some history, and they pretty much hired the worst person that they could because he's a recovering abusive drunk who, right before the movie even starts, it's known that he broke Danny, his little boy's arm, and like his wife has been like saying, "You have to get help. You have to get help." That's what I consider like psychological, where it's like the character's already kind of messed up, and the situation is just making it worse to the point where he just gets an axe and just starts chasing after his family. Which,
In the case of The Shining, yes, but the definition of psychological is very heavily dependent on what context you're using it in. Us using it in the terms of psychological horror, especially based on the list we have, doesn't necessarily just include people who are already mentally screwed up. It is more of just the... Can I curse on the show?
fuck yeah.
It's the... it is more or less the fuckery of the events
Around them.
on people,
Okay.
on the characters, essentially.
Okay.
Because in The Shining, Jack's not the only one that ends up crazy. Danny
Shining
ends up
crazy.
whack, and the
Oh, the wife.
the
Oh,
wife sure as hell is not sane after
The
that.
wife and the actress went
Right.
nuts.
So that's
Damn.
that's
No, hold on.
No,
Yeah,
she legit went-
legit went nuts
because he stayed in character, I think, the entire time.
Also,
Or-
the director Stanley Kubrick, who he's an incredible director. Yeah.
Very
He's
well.
also known
to be a really hard ass.
like a really.
He had her
soft
keep
director.
doing the take, and he basically kept her scared the entire film.
There's like a single scene where it's simply just her backing up the stairs, and she's like trying to like hit him with a bat, and he's like doing a monologue and stuff. That took 127 takes.
Holy
He
shit.
So in this case, the psychological horror wasn't just the movie; it was the filming that led to the movie
Mhm.
as well.
Another thing that they also Kubrick did is that he told the crew to be rude to her, because the idea was he wanted to kind of make it like a method acting situation where it was like, because this wife is not getting any positive reinforcement in her life, kind of wanted to do that to the
Yeah.
actress to get her in that headspace. And when you do watch the movie, you can totally see that this poor woman is just like
Broken.
in this
It
situation.
got to the point where a lot of times you're watching the movie and you're like, is she actually acting or is she genuinely terrified?
sometimes those tears look a little too real.
Right.
And that's the thing with like crying, like that can look really fake, but sometimes you're like, oh no, that person looks.
I think
entirely
that goes
messed up.
back to the definition that we were talking
Yeah.
about before of psychological horror, is that there are some commonality elements, but the actual definition changes per what you're watching.
Changes contextually.
It might be within a like mental disease and the fighting of that, in the realisms of it. It might be in the reality break or the dissociation of.
Mhm.
It could even be in like what we're saying, like a violence triggered response to like they're chasing, and it really makes you feel tension and like you're really sucked in and you feel in danger the whole
Mhm.
time. And that the genre is a little bit different than like a typical genre such as like a zombie movie, right? Like,
Yeah, you know what
there's
the
a
threat
monster
is.
all
Yeah.
the time. And the psychological horror films are more varied
Mhm.
in that it is
Sometimes like
different pieces of cognition that are causing you to feel a certain way.
And you can question your morals.
Right,
Too, sometimes.
right.
It'll make the watcher question quite a bit, because it's not just the psychological torment of the characters. It's a lot of time it's the viewer, the player, the person behind the screen watching this take place with the inability to do anything real about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also want to say, like, I know that some people may argue, why wasn't The Shining on our paranormal movie episode? I would say because you can honestly make a theory that maybe the ghosts aren't real in this movie. You can make a legit theory and it would make sense. Personally, I do think that there are ghosts at play, but they are not the ones, like, actually attacking.
It's not the main torment of the
No,
movie.
like, they're tormenting this one guy
Who's
into
already
doing
fucked up.
Yeah.
doing things that are horrible for, I don't know, like their sick game.
They're not the climax of the movie
No,
at
yeah.
all.
I feel like a commonality we'll see as we go through the list is that there is some sort of psychotic break that occurs
Oh,
in whether very apparent or not very apparent that sets it apart from being like a
Mhm.
ghost movie or something else, where this mental break is almost like a climax point in the movie where it changes the whole character. It like spins it on its head almost.
Yeah. 'Cause
So
from-
where it is an entirely new character now with
Yeah.
different attributes and traits, and that pushes the movie in a certain direction.
Yeah, 'cause from what I'm hearing, The Shining, the ghosts are more like the conduit, not the actual ones doing the harm itself.
yeah. It's like background characters versus main characters.
The film is really well shot. It has some beautiful like gliding angles because this was like one of the first films to use the Steadicam. Actually, I think Halloween was, but this film used the Steadicam in a really cool way. This movie has a ton of iconic scenes from the twin girls down the hallway. Come play with us, Danny. Come play.
The carpet itself
The carpet.
in
yeah.
the hallway,
Oh, yeah, the carpet.
the
What else?
maze, the house.
The maze, that's really popular. And then there's the ultimate scene of like the "Here's Johnny," that one.
hmm
Yeah,
That's been done over and over.
it's been parodied numerous times. Also, I just want to say, this movie has a weird relationship with the author of the book. Because Stephen King, he does not like
Yeah, he hates
this
this.
version of The Shining. He hates it because he says that their version of Jack Torrance is not the one that is like the book. Like his version of Jack Torrance is very empathetical. Like you feel bad for what is happening. Jack Nicholson, who plays Jack Torrance in the movie, kind of plays it more, pretty much throughout the movie, as kind of like this shithead.
He enjoys it.
He doesn't enjoy it at first. He's just kind of like, yeah, I fucked up. She will never let me not know about it. She always keeps bringing it up, and it's just kind of annoying. So he's always kind of a piece of shit throughout the movie. And then when shit hits the fan, it just goes off the rails. And Stephen King did not like that. And also there's little things like how the movie ends. He was like, how his book ended was like a nice warm ending, whereas the movie ended in like a really cold,
Empty.
empty feeling kind of way.
I would feel like it's almost two artists taking a shared vision in different directions.
I agree.
Like even Stephen King developing the idea and creating it into the book
Mhm.
was one interpretation. We talked about something in a previous episode, like Frankenstein. I feel like that's another similar case of where, depending on your own disposition, you choose to see who's the real monster. Is it Frankenstein or is it the Doctor?
Yeah.
And so I think this is another kind of case that it's like two people seeing the same thing but taking very different ideas from it. And so there's value, obviously, in the original author and what they think. But I think there's also shared merit in the movie adaptation and what it
He said,
became to be known as like a almost cult classic,
Yeah, yeah.
commonplace thing.
well, I don't think it's like cult because like, well, it has like a modern day sequel and everything. like that.
I mean,
Because,
cult
like,
classic is in something
how
you
it's
share within
old.
an inner circle.
Okay,
Like,
fair.
we gotta
Yeah.
watch The Shining, or we gotta watch
okay.
this movie because
fair.
it's just so good.
Stephen King has said also, like, I just don't like the movie because of that reason. You can like the movie just fine. Like, I don't have a problem with anybody liking the movie. That's just because that character of Jack Torrance meant a lot to him because he went through addiction problems and, like, how that affected his family. So that character meant a lot to him. So seeing
Right.
it portrayed in a weird way was, like, not
Insulting. It felt insulting.
maybe not insulting.
Well, the way I say it like that is like if you take a piece of artwork that an artist made and you paint over it, if they're still alive, they're going to be offended because they're like, they spent all that work on the original painting.
I would say
For
to
you to change
specify self-portrait. It's
Right,
like taking a
self-portraits.
self-portrait and painting over it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, that was me, and now you altered it to be something
Right.
that isn't.
So
Yeah.
it seems insulting for a bit. You're like, okay, you put all that work in, and then you just go and change it.
Mhm.
So that's where I can see him coming from on that point.
We're going to move on to another movie. This one is a bit more in the 90s. This one also has been known to be like the artsy kind of horror or the respected horror,
Mm-hmm.
and that's The Silence of the Lambs. Now,
I hate that movie. I watch a lot of movies, especially when I was a kid. To me, this movie felt really super slow for no apparent reason.
oh,
And so, as someone like me who has some patience issues with ADHD, it's one of those things that's just like, this movie it's so slow. I can't. I've watched it to full maybe once, and I still do. I get why people like it, and I don't dislike the movie. I do not like how it is paced and the runtime of it.
that's fair. I just have to respectfully disagree. I just love the pacing of this movie. Adds to the creepiness of it because, like, one of the things that I love about this movie is sometimes there's just this weird dead air of, like, all right, what's going to happen next? And when something happens, it's like, ugh. What the movie is about is that there's this female CIA or
FBI.
FBI?
Something like that. Government agents.
Government agency lady who's trying to
FBI.
FBI. She's trying to get her way up into the ranks. She's like a rookie. She's one of two only women in the FBI department, and like she has to constantly have to prove herself, and it's one of the things that's like an unsung thing in the movie, but you can clearly notice that a lot of people are looking down on her, literally because she's kind of small as well. So she gets assigned to this case called the Buffalo Bill case, where this person has been going around kidnapping women, and then they find their bodies later with pieces of their skin missing and these moths in their mouth. And so what they decide to do is they decide to talk to another serial killer named Hannibal Lecter, played by the great Anthony Hopkins, who basically kind of toys with the main character Clarice throughout the whole movie, and like this weird, like, I personally like to think that he's infatuated with her. He has like a huge crush on her, and he just likes to mess with her mind and everything like that. It is like a really weird relationship these two have. But she has to kind of find a way to use his brain to understand the mind of a killer to find and hopefully stop this Buffalo Bill killer. And the reason why I say it's a psychological horror film is because of those slow-paced conversations with Hannibal Lecter, because he is literally trying to mess with the mind of Clarice. And when you find out what the Silence of the Lambs actually means, it means a lot to her because it is something from her past that he's intentionally using to mess with her. And that's why I consider it psychological. It could also be seen as a slasher because of Buffalo Bill, but Buffalo Bill is a stereotype of certain things that, like, it was definitely a movie made not in a progressive time, because the Buffalo Bill character is a, how do I say this?
Stereotype? In the time
Yeah.
it's described, it would have most likely been described as, transvestite.
Yeah.
But I believe now,
Someone who's dysphoric with who they are
yes.
physically in the world at
Yes.
that time.
Yeah.
From what I can remember, it's very much. I'm trying not to spoil anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much that aspect of it, but it's also on the movie itself. And like I said, even if I don't like it, I will admit it is a good movie. The acting is good,
Mm-hmm.
and especially with Anthony Hopkins, I love it. Love the acting. For certain people, it's not paced well. Which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
It is psychologically a good movie if you get personal with the main character. If you're a person, and just hear me out on this, that doesn't get as personal with main characters as some people might, or doesn't see the main characters as what's the word? Relatable, then it might not be as psychologically horrific to them. As for them, it's a little bit more disconnected. Because for psychological horror to really affect people, there's something in there that has to tug on the audience.
I have a question real quick. Why can't you relate to Clarice? Because I find her relatable, even though
I did not say I couldn't relate to Clarice.
Okay.
I just said there are people that will not find this as a psychological horror. I still find it psychological horror as much as I am not a personal fan of it.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to say.
I actually find that I'm in a position that's different than both of you when it comes to why I enjoyed this movie.
You think it's mid?
No. Not for the meme context.
Okay.
But I agree with your points. It is very slow paced to the point. I think this film does a really good job of the unsettling nature of small details.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
So while I don't identify with Clarice at all, like there's nothing about me that relates to Clarice. I agree, it is a very long piece.
The only thing I can relate to Clarice is that feeling of sometimes you're in this position where you are like the only one.
You're seen as inferior.
You're seen as inferior. I mean, there's certain things that I'm privileged to, but still, like, I've felt that situation where, like, no one is listening to me, and the only person that is listening to me
is the weirdo
in the room.
Sure,
yeah,
and while I'm saying that it's valid, I'm saying I'm coming from a position that is both not relating to the main character and also not relating to the pacing. Those things happen, but I think what really drives home is not so much horror as the unsettling nature of the entire span of time you spend in this story, right? Where this story over time, as you evolve with it, you slowly creep into the world a little more. Until the end where you're like, oh, it's almost as like I'm the crime scene photographer coming in to photograph what happened afterward. Like, you somehow became connected, not as the main character, not as Hannibal Lecter, not as Buffalo Bill. You are a chorus member in this ensemble of characters, witnessing a very real-world mimicked event. You could understand Hannibal Lecter being a real person you've heard about. You can understand Clarice being a real person you've known. You can understand Buffalo Bill being a real person you've encountered or read about. There's nothing about this that feels not realistic to the reality we all live in. And that in and of itself is unsettling because you could see your neighbor being Hannibal, you could see your best friend being Clarice. Like that. That's a stretch, but you could see people you've met or people you will come to know as these archetype characters in the way they don't fit in or do fit in. And I think that is the aspect that is unsettling, is because you can relate to it very easily at some point in your life.
It's like with all the details that you are given enough to become engrossed in the storyline, not as a watcher, as a interactor.
Right, exactly.
Like an interactive story
to the whole event that is occurring before you.
Right.
Also, I just read like the entire plot synopsis of Silence of the Lambs. That ending for the fucking movie.
It's weird.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
That just goes into like straight obsession and stalkerish on Lecter's part.
Welcome to psychotic infatuation.
Yeah.
That's a part of the psychological part of the movie. Is he is a psychopath.
Oh, no doubt.
I would beg to differ. Almost all of them are.
Right.
From Clarice all the way to the end, I would beg that they all are overly psychologically driven.
But there is to a more simple point. Imagine as if all three of the characters that we have talked about are all psychopaths. You have the one that got caught, the one that has evaded so far, and the one that is the psychotic normality.
Oh, okay.
Or the one that has gotten away with it because they're not psychotic in the point of harming good people or innocent people. They put their energy towards finding others like them and stopping them.
Okay.
Their psychotic infatuation is the halting of other psychotic individuals.
Okay.
I think I take a very similar approach to that. I think the unsettling nature is that you could say that any of the three are all very similar, and that is unsettling in and of itself, because she is like 1 to 2 steps by the end of the movie away from giving anything to stop it.
Yeah.
Right? And that in and of itself is saying if you just take 1 or 2 steps too far in anything you pursue,
you're
not unlike Buffalo Bill or Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
Well, just by using Hannibal Lecter himself
Right.
to basically help you with this situation is already kind of like a crazy leap, because you're playing with fire.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the unsettling part of the whole thing, is you're like, oh wow, like no one is safe from 1 step too far.
And you can almost see, it's almost like, to a point, Hannibal knows she's like him, and he's trying to get her
he very much does.
He's trying to get her to realize she's no better than them.
Yeah.
Because in the long run, if she realizes that, she wouldn't need his help.
Right.
She could do it on her own. But because she doesn't want to admit that, she's going to him.
Yeah.
He's narcissistic enough to believe that everyone is that way. And we see him that way until the end, where you maybe think, oh wow, I'm not too unlike any of these people.
Right.
And that, I think that is what... it's not horror until the ending.
That is the nail in the
ending
coffin.
is where you realize the actual horror of the whole movie as you, in retrograde, look back.
Yeah.
I think that's the real horror aspect of this movie. The rest is like watching an episode of any crime drama.
Criminal Minds.
Yeah.
Like any crime
Very
drama
much.
until the end, and you go, oh wow,
This is
these
screwed
characters were so well artistically written that you see too much of yourself in them, and that is the unsettling part.
Yes.
Wow. That was a great discussion about Silence of the Lambs. I never thought we would be that deep about it.
Welcome to that.
Well, to be fair, it's a psychological episode, so might as well get deep with it. The next film we're going to talk about is Seven. Spoiler warning, so if you still care to
Watch the 7.
watch Seven, take a
Watch it,
break
yes.
if you're listening to this live, or if you're watching this on YouTube, skip to another part, which is the David Fincher classic starring Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman. I almost said Martin Freeman.
Morgan Freeman.
Look at
It's
bro.
like 2 completely different people.
Yeah.
Great actors, both of them, but
Yes.
still. But yeah, Morgan Freeman. Yeah, this film is about... I don't think they specify what city it is. It's just meant to
I
be
think
like...
it's Las Vegas. Or it's meant to be around.
It's supposed to be like a big
a
city
shitty
based
city.
on...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like Chicago, New York style city.
Yeah. Big metropolitan city
Gotham.
that has like literally like what Gotham is meant to be, like a
Yeah.
very closely mimicked
Yeah.
metropolitan city in the real world,
And
whatever it is.
Brad
right.
Pitt's character is supposed to be like this new rookie detective who wants to
With
break
the
out on the
seasoned
scene.
detective trope.
With the seasoned detective being like, no, you don't want to fucking get into this. Get out of
Right.
the city. And oh my... I hate the fucking ending. I can still picture it because I watched it with one of my best friends and we were both just like, oh shit.
But yeah, there's a killer going around basing his murders off the 7 deadly sins. They're pretty much just tasked with trying to figure out who this killer is, completing all 7 of these murders. Or killings, because technically not all of them are murders.
Yeah,
In
because
the end, at least.
Sloth was not a murder, it was a slow torture.
Pretty much. It's
And then I think also for Lust, she was still alive after. Or she might not
no,
have. Or no,
no,
she
she
ripped up her
died.
inside.
No, person. Okay,
Yeah,
the
trigger
one
warning.
the Lust one, they don't show it,
Yeah.
but they have the guy basically like, okay, we're not gonna say what happens, but it involves something sharp in an area that I don't want to talk about.
It is a very intimate moment that is
Yeah,
skewed
because
in
she
the
was a
sense of pain and
prostitute.
danger
Yeah,
and
she was a
destruction.
prostitute.
Right.
Yeah, he decided because she was a prostitute, he decided that punishment would be suitable for her.
Right. I think the biggest psychological aspect of this movie, kind of getting into the main point of it, is the not so much what happens to the victims as much as it is what happens to the detectives as they move through the
Definitely.
investigation.
Like, Brad Pitt's character slowly loses
Both.
it. Or yeah, both.
Both.
But like
I would agree with her more in that, like
Morgan Freeman's character kind of stays more stable. Like,
Yeah.
he falls into like a little bit of a depression towards the end because he has an idea of what's going on, especially at the very, very ending. He's just like, oh no.
I feel the duality is the important part, though. I feel like with that there is an effect on both, but not how is very apparent.
Mm-hmm.
In that, in a lot of traumatic events, there's someone that is the control and someone that is the affected. And the control is like, you'll make it out of this, you'll be okay.
Yeah,
The
and that's
person
Morgan Freeman's
affected
character.
has a very different experience.
Uh-huh.
And without the control, the movie is entirely different. There's almost a sadness to the fact that he is acclimated to this type of horrific event. And
Yeah.
He's
the
the old
trauma
one
that is
down.
inflicted throughout the period of the movie on the Brad Pitt character.
Because Brad Pitt's character, obviously he's new to the scene. He doesn't have like the psychological walls Morgan Freeman's character has built up over time. He's being thrown right into this giant case that's going to fuck with his head. And eventually, spoiler for the ending, he ends up going to prison because he ends up killing the guy because the other guy is like envy because he was jealous of the other guy's life and
Mess.
his pregnant wife.
And dogs.
Yeah.
The dogs die too.
Ah!
That one too. Yeah.
You don't see the dog's death, but they look on the side of the road and like, oh, those dogs look familiar. You miss it, but like when you hear like, oh, those were his dogs.
I'm never watching this movie.
I think the correlation with Silence of the Lambs, as was brought up earlier by Max, is that this is another movie about the details.
Yeah.
This movie, if you don't take note of the details, kind of gets lost in the mix. There's like a lot going on. There's a lot of very traditional cop drama things going on.
Yeah. And if you don't
But
pay attention to the character,
The part that really makes your skin crawl, the part that really makes you uncomfortable, is the small details you pick up about the killer as you go along, and about how it reflects in contrast to the Brad Pitt character. So I'll
Yeah.
agree with you in that sense. The big linchpin of the whole movie is the Brad Pitt character versus the killer, and how by the end of it they're not so different, given enough trauma, right? Like the response you'll have.
Mhm.
But I think on the whole, the control is what makes Brad Pitt's character feel crazy by the end, and the killer is just very obviously against social norms. So I don't think that's too hard to conceptualize.
I don't want to say who the killer's played by, but I feel like we should give a warning about who it is.
Maybe
Also,
in this
he's not in the
context.
movie that much, so
yeah, you don't really see his
very
face till the end.
sparingly, and
and
I think
he's the
that,
villain. So,
But I think that is of note, though, is that this movie works almost entirely with a covert operative sort of way of interacting, whereas a lot of these other movies are like, even though you may not know the killer, it feels more at the front of the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Buffalo Bill case and Silence of the Lambs feels very much the topic of conversation. This, to me, doesn't feel as much about the case as it is about the change in the dynamic of the characters. One is cemented in reality, being Morgan Freeman, and one is cemented in the thrill of the chase, right? And taking it one step too far and losing everything. And how
also,
that creates the break.
kind of like the religious aspect too, because he's obviously killing with the 7 deadly sins.
Right.
yeah.
It's just like they have to analyze, like, okay, what is he going to do with this? Like, what else can
What
he
does this
do?
mean?
Because
Right.
gluttony, small spoiler, gluttony. He makes him cut out a chunk of his own stomach and eat it, like a
Mhm.
Yes.
pound of his own like flesh.
Pound of flesh.
And then pride. I can't remember what she had to do. I think she had to like cut up her face really bad.
It was,
Or-
it,
I know.
all of the crimes are extremely gruesome.
I think the one that got me was Sloth, where
Yeah.
he's like forced to be tied up to the bed, and he has all these bed sores around him, and he's just
Right.
emaciated and still. When they get in there, like they're like, "Oh, it smells." And it's practically a dead guy, but then like, all of a sudden he like breathes, and like, holy shit, he's still alive.
This is just a really quick relation. This is sounding very relative of someone who's not watched this movie to Saw.
Yes,
Kinda, yeah.
Saw was inspired.
It is
by
not
this
as gruesome,
as Saw, yeah.
but the psychological aspect of like
Right.
almost like repentance in a way for your sin is kind of
Yeah.
akin to the way the Saw like contraptions
Yeah.
and
Gotcha.
puzzles
Also-
are
Yeah,
set up.
basically 7 walked so Saw could run.
Also, like if you're a DC fan and you recently saw the new Batman movie, a lot of people have said that the new Batman movie takes a lot of heavy influences from 7 with how the killer is portrayed. In
I would
that
say
movie,
the
Riddler-
pacing and the way the actual plan is set up
Mhm.
in Batman, you will find a lot of congruence with Saw.
Yeah,
Mm.
Like they, or not
And a
with
lot
Saw,
of
I'm
David-
sorry, with 7.
in a lot of David Fincher movies, that new one, was inspired by it. But yeah, okay, we're gonna kind of get into a little bit of meme culture with this next one.
Which one's this one again?
We're gonna be talking about American Psycho.
Oh my god.
Let's go! Alpha Sigma Male, yeah. Patrick Bateman. Alright, yeah, this one... Alright, I'm just gonna say this up top. I don't know what is the deal with this becoming a meme all of a sudden.
I have a very strong
Because it's
opinion about
funny,
this.
bro. It's
Okay.
just funny.
It's funny, but I do want to comment, and this may be a little unpopular, but I think it is the dysphoria men feel between how they are perceived as a construct and how they are as a person.
Yeah. Okay.
And when
yeah.
taken to its logical breaking point, you get Patrick Bateman. Like, no, seriously,
Yeah.
like,
No, you're
when
right.
you are
Very
held to
right.
such a constructed ideal, in the same way that women have been fighting back against their constructed ideal by society, men are also fighting against this constructed ideal in society. And when you are taken to a point where you are nothing unless you are this ideal, if you can't resist it, you break to it, and you become literally, like, you fall
That's
into a
like-
pit
yeah.
of craziness. Like, you have no sense of self, like, you have dysphoria, like, you have nothing. And so you kind of take on these very crazy, outlandish things.
Yeah.
And maybe at the time it wasn't meant that way, but it's come
Oh.
back in meme culture
Well,
as
hold
this
on.
way of aligning the two between, like, the logical breaking point is the dysphoria.
I think it was totally meant to be that thing because the book is written by a guy, but the movie was directed by a woman. And knowing that, it makes this whole movie that much more fascinating because she kind of really nails the whole, like,
She killed it.
pretty much
Point blank,
dick
she killed
measuring
it.
contest that is, like,
Masculinity.
masculinity.
Toxic masculinity. I
Toxic
should say.
masculinity.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like the whole scene of them just judging their business cards is hilarious because all of them look the same.
Right.
It is a great metaphor. I also say, just on like a character, like an acting perspective, like, man, Christian Bale. I hate the character, but he's really good.
I
at
keep
that
forgetting he's
character.
in
The actor is phenomenal. I forget the actor is
He's
acting.
so good. I hate him.
Right.
And if I this is just coming from someone who isn't a male identifying person when watching the movie, is even on that aspect, there's also, to me at least, and this can be argued by a lot of people, the aspect of, since it, especially the meme culture version, since it has so many funny instances in between complete psychopathy, it makes it basically makes your mind jump so differently emotional wise that you can't help but laugh at the funny moments, or at least be like, ha, and then at the non-funny moments just go, oh, he's crazy.
Yeah.
Huh.
There's some dark shit in this movie. Like,
But there's also some funny shit in this movie.
oh yeah, like, and darkly funny things, like the whole scene of
The cleanup
him,
scene?
Paul Allen. That whole scene where he's like dancing in his like little raincoat is really funny, and then he's like, "Hey, Paul," and then what? You bastard! Just like keeps hitting him with the axe.
Mhm.
Oh, that scene, dark, but so funny. Just because that
But,
whole
like,
situation.
Again,
made enough.
I think the director did a phenomenal
she just
Shit,
Capture-
wonderful.
of the dysphoria that men experience between what they show and what they feel.
definitely.
And so I think this character has become a relatable version as we pushed more for people to accept who they really are. It has come back to be like emblematic of the face that men put on to resemble their construct versus who they really are and the systemic pushback that society's created for them.
I'll say this: I find it so funny that people are actually taking this character as like a role model of like what to be. I find that so fucking.
Are they
funny.
really?
Well, there's like this-
See, I
children
wholeheartedly
with no
disagree.
dads.
I don't think I've seen anyone take it seriously.
I've seen a couple.
I think it is out of like memitude to mask the sadness of the relatableness to what this character
Okay,
is.
that's
But yes,
right.
but there is also cases
the
of
kids
many
that
things.
would follow that are like the same kind of kids that would follow Andrew Tate, though.
Exactly.
Any
Yeah, it's
like,
that
But they
toxic
don't get the
masculinity.
joke
male
that
role
this is.
figure.
Yeah, they don't get that this is a joke. Like
No,
they're making fun of.
No, but that
people like
that
this.
is the saddest part.
Yes,
because
that's what I'm saying.
I would say these going to become men
Yeah.
because they could be male identifying they are so beaten down and broken in who they should be systemically that they see this like toxically all the way at the top of the scale masculine and they're like, that's what society
But
wants.
it's also a thing of
That's the person.
a case of, and this also happens a lot, especially with media, popular media, something done ironically to the point it becomes unironic.
Right.
That's
I would
also,
agree,
and that's also a concerning thing with this movie, is if that's happening, that's not good.
Maybe not the murder part, the
Not the-
narcissistic tendency.
But even
Yeah,
the
yeah.
but even
And the way
narcissism
he
itself,
treats women.
Right, yeah,
that's
the
still not a
narcissistic
great thing.
tendency, not the murder. Yeah.
Like, the-
to
Yeah.
be clear, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
Just don't take any role model from this movie. No role
Yeah,
models here.
really.
No.
Yeah,
Just don't- just
that's
don't.
a good. Yeah,
Yeah, no role models.
be you, be all you, and if you don't like you, you'll like yourself soon.
or not.
Or later.
Yeah, or not.
Or not.
But
Eventually,
You
you'll
just
get
like
there.
took an axe and just chopped that fucker down.
and it's I'm that. Just like
Oh man.
Okay, we're gonna move on to another, a recent movie that's kind of like blown up and like pretty much started the career of like one of the new creative geniuses in like film in general.
Yeah.
We're gonna be talking about Get Out, and this is like Jordan Peele's directorial debut. Well, maybe not
it
directorial
was his debut.
I think it was.
but like it was the film that like
skyrocketed him
Yeah.
to the top.
skyrocketed. It was like his
Put him
first
on the radar.
real
It was
film.
pop culturally acclaimed,
Yeah.
right? Like it was known
It's very
widely
big
by the mass.
social
yeah,
social
masses.
commentary wise.
Very
Even
much so.
among like most circles, it's a very big
Correct.
social commentary movie, especially now. And
Yeah.
when it came out,
I think.
and
but
the
even
time
when
in
it came
between,
out,
before it came out, after it, yeah.
it's still sadly relatable.
Oh,
This
most
is one that I
movies
don't-
are,
I wouldn't say-
kind of relatable. Sadly enough,
Yeah.
we don't tend to fix our problems.
Nope.
To be honest,
We talk and bitch about them, but we don't fix them.
It's like therapy, you know.
except the work doesn't get done.
I
At
don't
least
do
this is entertaining.
I don't do my therapy work. I don't know about you. I don't do it.
Oh,
That movie fucked. No, I'm just kidding. All right, but yeah, Get Out is kind of like a simple premise that about it's an interracial couple. It's a black guy and a white girl. The white girl is inviting her black boyfriend to go to what is it, like a family get together or like a family and
Yeah.
It's
friend get
basically
together?
a
Their parents.
plantation estate that her parents live on.
yeah. It's
Really?
Ta-da!
That's very noticeable for the plot. Like
Yeah.
you need to mention
Oh, no,
that.
yeah,
If
you
you
know,
haven't
that's
seen
fair.
the movie, they essentially go home to a plantation estate with
Oh,
the
yeah.
family.
I'm
But yeah,
sure, like,
and-
I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm not sure where the state is, but I'm pretty sure it's also like a slave state.
It
Like,
looks
was
like
the state-
it looks
was
like
it-
Georgia.
I would assume.
Was it Georgia?
It looks like a
Definitely.
traditional plantation.
Yeah.
South.
Yeah.
Yeah.
South.
South.
Very southern.
Yeah, and then once they get there, weird shit starts happening. They have a couple. What is it like workers? On
So
workers, and I'm putting it in
Yeah.
quotation marks.
Paid workers,
Paid,
not
yeah,
slave.
not
Well,
sl-
possibly paid.
Well,
The
No.
one like camera guy that he like tried to talk to looked like he was already
Oh.
in a trance.
yeah.
So he
Oh,
might
wow.
have not have been paid.
I
We're
got
not
it.
spoiling it then. We'll hint.
Just
around-
just a heads
I
up.
would say that, oh, go ahead.
This
You
movie,
haven't seen it already.
we say this as like it's a brand new movie.
Yeah.
This
no.
movie came out in 2017.
Okay. I
So
haven't
for
seen
for
it.
a lot of people, for a lot of people that might be listeners, this movie would have came out around your first year of college, if not when you were in high school. And for a lot of people that were in high school around this movie, it was a very big commentary,
Definitely talked about.
especially if you were from a southern state.
Or any state.
So
It was all over.
I
It was
would
everywhere,
say I
yeah.
would say the reason that this movie is a commentary, and I'm saying this as a white male, is
Yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
No,
Not
no,
white.
I think I'm no. I think I'm no. As a white male, the reason there was commentary so much for this movie is it really plays on the implicit bias that operates during your normal state of being that you may not even realize. I would say about half the
Okay.
movie
Yeah.
is the underlying perception that you won't really see the bias until the end of the movie looking back.
Oh,
So again, like all the other movies, in retrograde, you won't see it the first time you watch, but by the end, you're like, oh my god, like I saw it. I saw where it started with like the paid workers, quote unquote, all the way to the point where you really get the main plot going into attention.
so
Oh, here
so-
we go.
two things. A, this is apparently it was filmed in Alabama, but
Oh.
in the movie they're going to visit her family in quote unquote upstate New York. For context. So
Oops.
so on what Zach said, I disagree in the fact of There are a very, very large amount of signs in the beginning of this movie. When they get to his house, he's on the phone with his friend who's like, dude, I don't know about this. White woman, white family. You know how this goes. And he walks into the house, he meets some of the workers, and he's on edge 95% of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
After everything that happens, no matter what, he is on edge this entire movie. So the reason that I disagree with Zach is because with that being the case, unless, and I apologize for how I say this, but it's the only way I can properly phrase it in my brain, unless you watch this movie completely blind and deaf, it's very difficult to at least notice some of the
so not watch it at all.
more out. Even if you see the trailer, you notice something is wrong.
Yeah.
So I will agree with you. I know you're right. Like you can tell there's something wrong. But what I was getting at is that
you can't tell what exactly is.
No, it's not even that, Chris.
No, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So what I'm throwing
know
out there
what's
is
going
like, you know, when you have a shared experience with something, you have a hypersensitivity to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can relate to the uncomfortableness of walking to an all-white room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying that hypersensitivity
Family gatherings
probably plays off earlier in the movie than when the typical white viewer
Mm-hmm.
picks up on the fact that it's uncomfortable.
That's fair.
That's what I was trying to provide. Is like my experience in dealing with a varied population of people. I was also uncomfortable, as in something feels off, but it is not so violently apparent until the point where you see the ghosts, so to speak, come about. Where it's like, oh, that felt uncomfortable, but I didn't recognize it was basically trying to mimic like a modern day slavery.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't appear until in retrograde. But maybe in your experience as someone who may have had that actual experience in personhood, created that appeal. As soon as you watch it, like, oh, I know right what he's feeling.
Right. I feel like we need to give context to the listeners. There, out of the 5 people here, 2 of us are African American.
Yeah.
So that's what when some of us say we, or when some other of us say other people, that's the context of this conversation right now. Right. And you are right, because I'm actually biracial, so I do have a half Caucasian family and I have a half African American family. Mm-hmm. And I have watched this movie one time, and I watched it with my dad, who is African American, because
that's good.
I know
I just
that
find that funny, just knowing what the situation about the movie.
Is. Yes.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I just imagine that awkward look toward the
Well, it wasn't even because of that. Where I am from a not south state, but a more southern state than Wisconsin. Where I am from, where my mom lives, it is a very heavy Caucasian demographic, and my dad's house, it is not. And so it is one of those things where just by looking at the poster or the trailer, I can tell that if I watch this with my mom, she will not understand it, and I'm not going to fight her to understand it.
No, it does. Even just as a black person, seeing that the director is Jordan Peele, you know it's going to be something racial. So even going into the movie, your mindset is I'm nitpicking everything. I'm saying I'm watching every little
what's
detail. Off, what's on? Why is that off? Why is that on? What are they trying to tell me? And how bad is it going to get?
I will also say real quick is that, along with your point of the reason why I would consider this movie also psychological is
plays with the viewer.
It plays with the viewer because at a point you could, if you don't know what happens at the end and you're just watching this for the first time, you could in that moment kind of make the argument this movie could end up just being he's just paranoid about this whole thing because all these people are making legitimately offhanded remarks to him, the whole scene where they ask him about, oh, do you play a sport? What do? You're so artistic. How big is your dick? All that kind of thing.
But
yes, they asked him that question.
They do ask him that question.
If you go
straight
into
up.
I worked Country
Shelldyn
Thunder.
adjusts the pillow.
I worked Country Thunder, and that is the quintessence of white entitlement. Mm-hmm. So I was asked virtually all those questions, how do you feel about Morgan Wallen? How big is it? What sport do you play? And I have to say wrestling. They're like, oh, that's weird. That's a white man's sport. Why are you playing that? So I get where you're saying from that uncomfortability of he could just be paranoid, and it's just
it's playing on the audience of he could be paranoid, but these are still problems.
Yeah.
And that these are problems that everybody's gonna have to face.
And then you just see it go to shit.
I think I've been gifted a unique experience in that I've worked with primarily African American communities. communities,
Mm-hmm.
or primarily minority
Mm-hmm.
communities, even broader,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. And getting that experience to understand some of the systemic bias, some of the challenges, some of the obstacles, when viewing a movie like this, I watched it before I had that experience, but now looking back on it, I think the actual psychological horror part is both in what Max said, in that there is this kind of like, did it really happen moment, but also it's that the experience of the viewer is psychological on the viewer for two different reasons. It's either, wow, this is really traumatic in the experience it created, right? Like, it's very violent, it's very hateful. Like, the whole thing is racially based in hate. And I can imagine, I can't experience, but I can imagine where that would be hateful. But I also, as my experience, have like I can't believe as a people we allowed this to happen. And there's almost like a guilt you take home with you from the experience.
I have one thing to say real quick that made this film kind of relatable to me. On one side of my family, it's mostly white, but one of my cousins married like a black Cuban girl when we were hanging out. And this was after the movie came out. And my grandparents were asking similar questions to her like this, and I was like, bro, like, they nailed it, like, because, like, I felt so bad for her, because I was like, she's just, you know, trying to meet the family and everything like that. Stop asking her these questions. She doesn't.
There's questions you would never ask, like, a white counterpart.
No, yeah. I was just
It's
like,
also,
come on.
like...
I'm not saying, like, it's relatable to me, but I know someone
You can see
in my
it.
family
You're in an
who
experience
had
where
to
you
deal
saw
with
it.
that, and
Right.
I was like, I don't know. I'm just going to talk to you. It's just like I was going to talk to you and any other person. Just like, she does play. Shout out Maria. She's like an Olympic level jiu-jitsu
Oh,
master.
shout out to Maria,
Yeah,
man.
she could kick everybody's ass in this room. But so we would talk about that. She'd be really happy about that. But then, like, one of my uncles would ask her about Fidel Castro, and I'd be like, "What the
Why?
fuck?"
It's also a thing of I'm not going to spoil the ending, but I'm going to. This is a sort of what doesn't happen. They actually had an alternate ending for this movie where he got shot and killed at the end, the main character.
Mm-hmm.
They had to change that because not only was the audience response so bad, but because of the things that were happening in 2017 and 2016, it was no bueno. It was not very. It was not a good
Well,
ending.
the director also said, like, he didn't want to. He's not a nihilistic person. Like, he wanted to have it be sadly real.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
But
the thing
he
is,
thought it's a movie.
Why not leave it last?
Leave it with, like, a good ending.
I think
It's
the
not
current events of the time also has something to do with that.
It was
current
events. Shot in the street,
'Cause
and
that
then
was-
you have a movie about a black person getting shot in the street.
I'm not
And it
gonna-
wasn't
I would
that.
I would beg to
I
say,
think it's
I would
both
beg
of
to
it.
say the problem is still there.
it wasn't
Yeah,
just
say
it
the
wasn't just that.
problem's
Let me phrase the ending a little bit. He wasn't just shot, because in the ending, he stops a police car and gets shot by said police officer
Yeah.
as they
That's
get out the car.
Yeah,
That is why the
that's
ending
a
was
very,
changed.
That's
Yeah.
problematic.
At that time, that is a very problematic.
Because that is not only is that an unsatisfying ending for what
Even
this
now,
person
it's still
just
problematic.
went through, it's also an unsatisfying ending because of the events of the time.
The climate.
That would have been. I'm literally shaking remembering that used to be an ending in that actual movie, and what you're saying about how you've experienced people being asked this question, asked that question. It's the same thing as in my context as a biracial person. There are things that people assume that aren't true, and then there are things people assume that are true that I hate that are true. Mm-hmm. It's stuff like that with this movie that is, when it comes to psychological horror, I would argue this movie is not just psychological horror on everybody. It is not 10 times, but just to be as obvious,
Dramatic.
it is 10 times worse for not just minorities.
Dramatic.
Because this is the thing I do feel need to get specific for, but for
interesting one to say.
African American people who are partially African American, because this is genuine. It's not just preying on, oh, this is a movie thing. It's preying on stuff that this at the time generally happened. Maybe not to the extent. Maybe not to the extent in the movie, because the movie is very extravagant and over exaggerating.
Yeah,
but in the terms of going somewhere, experiencing those questions with someone who you assume to be your significant other, and what ends up happening, this movie damn near made me cry.
Yeah.
Of fear.
I would almost beg to agree that it is more traumatic for the African American population. I would actually disagree. I think it's more important that the Caucasian population sees it. And here's why. So traditionally speaking, in theater and art, tragedies were always used to provide a political point, as in the emperor, the governor, whatever, without punishment. So while people may refute news, may refute commonplace experience, it's very hard for them to refute art on a systemic level.
Yeah.
So showing a traditionally, historically accurate perspective of what African Americans have gone through makes it very hard for a subset of Caucasian populations to refute the idea that we caused a large body of harm on a very large population of people.
So it's different trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
The trauma isn't so much that I feel bad for what my ancestors did. It's how do I make sure this doesn't happen
Right.
again?
Yeah.
It's like watching, if you ever read through a book about World War II,
Yeah.
you go, oh my God, that's so horrific. How do we make sure World War II never happens again? The same mentality should be taken to any sort of systemic enslavement, property taking, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Because that was how it felt for that population. It was that same level of desolation and destruction.
Yeah.
So I think this movie, and as we talked about, it was a very divisive climate around the time it came out. And I would say that's why, is because people couldn't refute it. They couldn't write it off. They couldn't say that it wasn't what happened. Because it was very closely to what really happened to these people.
And they were also,
even the ghosts in the movie.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a very well done artistic point.
Yes.
From a very historically accurate perspective of these kind of films.
It's an important film
from the director.
For non-minorities. What I more or less meant, take this with a grain of salt, is just how I can phrase it, is whereas an African-American audience will walk in and see this movie and walk out like shaking, like,
fear.
There are people that, because you can't say it hasn't happened because you can't say guess who everybody is. But there are people that walked in, saw this movie, walked out, and and sighed with relief because they were not that main character. That is what I mean on the term of traumatizing via psychological horror. There are people that can walk in and see this movie, walk out and be like, it's fine. I'm not that character. Whereas for a lot of the African American population, they walk out and be like, that's eerily close to some stuff that I have. Some stuff in that is stuff I've experienced. What if that could have happened to me? That's what I'm talking about, because that is a genuine fear. So many people, not just minorities, not just majorities, so many people face during certain points of media. That is why I thought it was important to point that aspect out for this movie.
I agree.
I don't want to disagree with you because I know that some people will feel like shaken, like, oh, that could happen to me. But the reason why I'm kind of like, I don't know if they would go that far is because this film does have a level of, I don't want to say like dark comedy, but like satire.
Yes.
In that, like, what it turns out to be is kind of ridiculous, but when you think of it as a metaphor, it's actually quite haunting. Like, what is actually going on? I'm trying to, like, really dance around what it actually is.
No, but my thing is, that's what I mean. That's the point I think you're missing, is it's the fact that people can walk out of this and think that can happen to me. That's why this movie is so important.
Okay.
It's because as extravagant this movie is, the fact that there are people that can walk out and be like, this could have happened to me. Or, in Caucasian case, I could have done this to someone on accident.
Right.
That is the inherent psychological horror of lasting psychological horror of this movie.
It's only satire to the white people, but to the people that can share in the experience, it's a very real thing.
Uh-huh.
As dark humor is, like when people make dark humor about mental illness and the effects of it.
Yep.
It's funny to people that understand because they can relate. It is funny to other people because it is funny.
Right.
I think that's a good way to sum it up for the viewers. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been an episode. Okay, so we're going to move on to some foreign horror movies. I don't think most of you have seen some of these.
Nope.
Okay, I'm going to talk about one that's a bit fucked up.
Same.
Bro.
Sorry.
Hey, yo.
Real.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Martyrs. Or I'm going to talk about
My head
Martyrs.
hurts.
What? Alright, Martyrs is a film about a girl. It's either Lucy or Anna. I can't remember at the moment. I'm sorry. But one of these girls, it went through a traumatic thing where she was tortured to a point. It basically did something to her mentally. So she escapes. And years later, after she's been living in an orphanage with another girl, I think named Lucy, or Anna, whatever, she decides to get revenge on all the people that were in this cult that tortured her. But here's the thing about the movie. You never see the torture that she went through. You only see her revenge killings in the beginning of the movie, and then it's the first half is just the revenge killings. So you're kind of sitting there like, okay, why is this girl just going into these people's homes with a shotgun? Seriously, it's fucked up. It's messed up. But we don't know the context until, like, you kind of start to hear it from the characters about, like, no, something happened. Like, this girl experiences, like, this version of herself that's, like, all scarred up and tortured. That's kind of like a J-horror looking thing. Constantly chasing after her. It's this manifestation of this trauma that she is going through. And what the second half of the film is the torture of. So what the reason why it's called Martyrs is because this cult is wanting to torture people to such a limit that they can see heaven.
Well,
And then come back and tell them what it's like.
Well, they're never gonna get there, so.
That's the idea. It's this fucked up idea of, like, these people who deserve to go to hell, like,
are trying to
attain heaven. And the ending of this movie really is super nihilistic, and, like, they kind of get an answer, but the person that gets the answer just doesn't tell anyone. I won't say how, but she just kind of leaves the chat.
Same.
But yeah, the reason why this movie is so infamous, I should say, is its depiction of brutality, because they're not afraid to show women, like, in these really unfortunate circumstances and the effects of it. There's one image of this movie that's really well known, and sadly so, is that they have these devices on their heads that are literally screwed in, where they basically have these metal things they cover their eyes so they can't see, so they're just constantly, like, blinded, and they can't get it off because it's literally bolted to their head. It is severely messed up. There's also another thing in this movie that's really well known. I'll just say peeling. That's it. The reason why I want to put it on a psychological horror movie, and the reason why I want to talk about it, is because it is this version of horror. It's a French film. It's severely nihilistic.
You looked it up, didn't you?
Yep.
She looked it up.
And I looked it up on Not Private.
What'd you look at?
Always do incognito when looking up horror movies.
To push kind of ahead here.
Yes.
I think that while this is, like, the logical extreme of abuse, I feel like anyone that's experienced the abuse in their life probably finds some relatable quality.
Yeah.
I'm pushing from the aspect of the lasting scar that creates and the person it turns you into.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people only see the end product, the asshole, the nihilist, the
medicated.
The condescending, the, like, dramatic outlook of somebody, right? Like, they only see the end product, but they don't see the history that leads up to it.
Yeah.
And I feel like for some people, maybe that's a little too relatable.
And also,
And I haven't seen the movie, to preface, but I think any movie that incorporates elements that result from
trauma.
Intensely traumatic events emblemize that experience in that way.
Like, the things that happen to this girl are
Bad.
very bad, and do happen to certain people, like human trafficking victims and everything like that, because this is pretty much like she's a human trafficking victim. But one of the things that this movie does do is the relationship between the two girls. Like, I don't know if it's a romantic relationship or it's like a really sisterly or friendly relationship, but whatever it is a really interesting relationship of one person trying to help another person through their trauma and, like, get through this, because this girl is just like, I am only out for revenge because these people have done horrible things to me, and this other girl is like trying to help her move on from it any way she can. I won't say it's a film that you should go out and see. It's more of a film of, like, if you're interested and willing to put yourself through something that is intentionally made to make you feel uncomfortable and think of, like, a different form of, like, if you're like an optimist, if you're an optimist, this is definitely going to make you feel horrible,
like an asshole,
very pessimistic, nihilistic. That's the reason why I consider it very psychological. And if you want to hear more about films like this, this is a whole subgenre called extreme cinema. I did do a video with my friend Emily on these movies, and it was actually a fun video to make, despite the context of everything.
Despite the content being gruesome.
But yeah, Martyrs, really interesting, well done film. Another film that kind of plays on this is, now we're going to head over to South Korea, I should say, with I Saw the Devil.
Please specify South Korea.
North. Propaganda footage.
Yeah.
South Korea with I Saw the Devil. It's a movie about serial killer is on the move. He's going from victim to victim, and one day he goes after one victim of like this couple-week-old pregnant lady, and he kills her brutally, like body parts everywhere. And the husband of this person is, I think he's like CIA, high-level position, and he basically decides to get revenge. He gets revenge and beats the shit out of this guy 30 minutes into the film. He finds him, catches him, no problem. But what he does, he basically beats him to an inch of his life, and instead of actually killing him, he puts a tracker down his throat and lets him go. And then the killer goes on.
Like an idiot.
He continues to basically do his things, but since he has a tracker, every time the killer is about to commit a crime, the guy literally just pops up out of nowhere, beats the shit out of him again, and then leaves. And then
That's so much better.
I love this movie.
That's so much better.
Also, I'll say this, for like a psychological horror film, the action is really good. Like, the actor who plays the CIA agent is Byung-hun Lee. You don't know who that is. He was in Squid Game. I don't want to say who he was in Squid Game, because that's technically a spoiler for Squid Game. But if anything, he is also the guy who plays Storm Shadow in...
Yeah, G.I. Joe.
Yeah, G.I. Joe.
The modern day G.I. Joe.
Not the
trilogy.
new one. Not the new. That's a different actor. It's still cool actor.
No, it's the trilogy of them.
Yes.
Right. Rise of Cobra and the other ones.
Yeah, Retaliation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good actor. The reason why I consider it psychological, though, is what it does to the main character of, like, there's no amount of pain he can cause this guy that will equal the one that he's feeling. It's kind of playing almost on that dynamic of, like, a Batman-Joker thing, where Batman beats the shit out of the Joker, puts him in Arkham, he escapes from Arkham, continues to kill more people, beats the shit out of him, rinse and repeat. But this movie really kind of, like, shows that, and the killer kind of, like, catches on to, like, oh, I know what this guy's doing.
Maybe I shouldn't do this anymore.
No.
Oh.
He's like, I'm going to just make it worse for him.
When does that ever work?
I know. But no, he's just like, all right, I know who this guy is. I'm going to attack the in-laws. Yeah, it's this over-escalating thing of, like, this grief is causing so much more grief on the family, where it's if he were just to, like, catch this guy and have him face justice, like, in a court of law in any way, because he would go to jail. They have enough evidence on this guy. Unfortunately, he keeps mementos. I won't say what the mementos are of these people that he kills. Pervert.
I forgot,
Does he kill only
I forgot who
women?
you're talking
Yeah.
about for a second.
Okay, I can understand what momentous he probably took.
Yeah, I won't say it. I think compared to Martyrs, I think this film is a bit more watchable in that it does have extreme moments of violence. It's really bloody. There's also a shit scene.
Nice scat.
Whoa! It's not like you see
everyone loves watching that in their movies.
Yeah.
Well, it's unfortunately a logical reason why.
I know. Doesn't matter.
You don't have to explain it. Please don't explain it.
Don't.
I'm fine without the spoiler on this one.
That's fair. Yeah, highly recommend you watch this film.
I think the cool thing about this movie, without having ever watched it, right, just based on your synopsis,
Yeah.
is
Also,
that
I may not
it
be
is
doing a great job giving an idea of what this movie is.
it is very rare these days, I feel, right,
Mm-hmm.
so this is my opinion, that we get a dynamic where it is actually the main character going psychotic from their own choice rather than what happened. Like, right, you can experience grief and, like, the devastating fallout of it, but to almost basically willingly choose to fall further into it by following him rather than killing
Yeah,
him.
normally you see in the protagonist, like, a moral good.
Yeah.
There's
Right.
no moral good in this. It's all
Actually,
black
the
and gray.
corruption of the moral good occurs at the moment that they put the tracker down the guy's throat. because he's actually turning into the
You know
villain.
what it
by
kind
the
of
end.
reminds me of? Death Note. Because Kira, I mean, eventually, he
Yeah.
starts off being like this good guy, and he's like
Uh,
slowly killing more and more people.
Kira
I actually
does
think
not
I would
start
just
off as
go
a good
even
guy.
more broadly.
Yeah.
I think you could
Kira
find
starts
a,
off as a malignant narcissist and gets more malignant as the series progresses.
I would push to say that actually a lot of anime plays on that trope, or a decent amount enough
Mm.
of the corruption of a good ideal by a bad means
Mm.
that then creates a bad person. Stain from My Hero Academia is
Yeah.
another.
Also,
Yes.
A good ideal that creates a bad person. So I would go to say that I think anime presents a lot of those opportunities. It's very rare that we see it in cinema, though.
But yeah, I also will say, unlike some of the last film on this list, this film kind of ends in a. It's just a shot of this guy. It's just him, just kind of like happy, sad. It's such a good ending of like.
He's experiencing
not
the emotional
satisfying.
vortex.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so sad. The actor does such a great job. I forgot the name of the actor who plays the killer, but he does a great job of like portraying that like just piece of shit like villain. Like, oh, it's just
Someone
horrible.
you can very easily
Yeah.
hate.
Yeah, but it's hard to like for actors to like you can hate a performance, but like when the performance is so good, you're like, I fucking hate him.
I would say that again, calling back to anime, Berserk
Oh,
Griffith.
Griffith,
Griffith
yeah.
being a incredibly hateable villain because of the way that they actually write him into the story, is that he's so heinous that you can't help but hate him. There's no justification for it. Where you're like, how could you even? And I think that's very rare to get in live cinema.
Oh, what's that one movie we watched with Mad Dog and
The Raid.
The Raid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, Mad Dog, I couldn't totally hate him, but like the main villain guy,
Oh, the villain was a piece of shit. But Mad Dog was cool.
It's almost
Dog's
it's
awesome.
almost like what you're saying
Dog's
is that it's an anti-hero versus
Yeah.
a villain rather than
Oh, yeah.
meant to be a hero versus villain. So it's
Yeah.
not even Batman. It's like further. It's almost like Red Hood versus
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Joker.
I just say
Where
Batman
it's like-
because it's like the two
It's
of the same
quite
coin.
right,
essential.
but I'm just saying the extremity of what's
Yeah, yeah,
occurring
yeah.
is closer to Red Hood. Like he's willing to kill.
Batman's a hero.
He's
though?
holding himself back.
We're not talking about this.
We're not
right
gonna
now.
we're not gonna
We're
fight.
not- that
No.
would be a whole podcast.
That's
Let's
another
move
Moving
Right.
on. Moving on.
Let's
Moving
make
on.
this
Speaking
podcast
of-
2 hours.
Speaking of anime, real quick, I want to talk about Perfect Blue.
Okay.
Again, I think this is my favorite film on this list.
Is this an anime?
This is an anime.
animated movie.
Animated movie.
Nihongo
It's
no
not a show.
Yoga.
It is a movie. It's. I forgot the name of the director, but he sadly passed away.
Aw. R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. I forgot the name of the director. Please look up Perfect Blue and then IMDb that shit. But what this film is about is this J-pop star who is trying to get out of her like girl
Girl
band persona, where she's just seen as like this little innocent schoolgirl kind of like peace sign thing all the time. I don't know. I don't know the. I don't
She wants
know
to get
the
out of the
context.
pop girl persona.
Pop girl persona.
Good
Yeah.
girl image.
She wants
Good
to
girl
age
image.
up.
That's
Yeah, she wants to age up to like an adult
By
level.
killing people.
no.
Oh dang.
What?
Thought I was right.
When you said age up, that is totally true because what she tries doing, she wants to become an actress,
Oh.
and so.
So
she,
American version JoJo Siwa into what she is now.
I don't want to say that because what I'm about to say.
I
may
wouldn't
be
compare real
wrong.
people to the characters we don't know.
Yeah, because what happens is that this girl, the roles she starts taking to make herself a quote-unquote serious actress are incredibly uncomfortable, and like she has to do roles where they're consenting in that it's a set and everybody knows that this isn't real, but it's still like exploitive, where she's like, I'm just being used as like a piece of meat in this situation for like a dramatic effect. I'm just being used. And it's like it's her psyche just starts to go down the drain of like this original image of her that keeps on haunting her throughout the movie of like this perfect good girl persona, and then what she's become now. And upon all that shit she has to deal with, there is this stalker that is going around, and like at first he's just kind of like that weird incel, like, okay, he has an obsession, but he's not doing anything. Then he starts to like kill people that are
Get
kind
too
of
close to
close to the production. Like,
Oh.
I will only spoil one kill. He kills the main writer of the show that she was working on that had that scene because he was horrified about what happened to her.
Mhm.
So he was like getting revenge for her.
He's losing track of reality.
Yeah.
He ends up becoming more like a yandere.
Yeah. Yes.
Someone love that he kills.
Yeah.
For people that don't understand what a yandere is,
It's
it's
someone
like being so in
obsessed.
love you kill, or so deranged in
Yeah,
like
so
a
psychotically
fascination
obsessed.
or obsessed,
Uh-huh.
that you kill.
Miyari Nikki is a good anime.
Mirai-
Nikki Diary. Watch
Um,
that if you want to see a
That
good
is the quintessential yandere, I would go to
Uh-huh.
say.
Oh, Mirai Nikki.
I will only. I can't say anything else because I don't want to spoil. Like, this movie does have a twist that makes sense, but I did not see coming. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
It was right there the entire time, and I was like, that makes so much
I
more
have a
sense.
question. Is she as angry enough about how she's being exploited?
What do you? Okay.
Does she ever express anger? Again,
Yes.
I've never seen
Yes.
this for the audience.
One of the most infamous and popular scenes that has been aped into another film is a scene where she's in a bath and like she has her head under the water and she just screams at the top of her lungs underneath water.
Isn't that movie?
This is that movie, and that scene was then replicated in A Requiem for a Dream, shot
Mhm.
for shot.
Mhm.
One was just animated, one was just
Mhm.
live action. And this film has also been known to be kind of similar to Black Swan in themes.
Yeah,
They have
we were
another
we were-
bad scene.
Perfect Blue, I think, it's beautifully animated. It delves into a character's psyche, and it also has an ending that is so ambiguous, but like you could see it as either like a really weird but funny thing, or you can see it as, oh shit, like that's not good.
Yeah.
Like she is completely delved into this thing that she just was trying to get rid of. Like it's a sad film.
I want to make 2 points on that. One, I think if you are a viewer of traditional Eastern Sphere media, a lot of things end in a very non-satisfactional ending in the traditional like American or European sense, where it's very open-ended. You kind of can draw your own interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's not very concrete what happens. But 2 is that I think the beginning, without having seen the movie, so I don't know what this
All right,
plot twist
say
is.
it
I
and
don't
I'll-
know. What the stalker is doing is like emblematic of the rage she feels inside, taken to its logical extreme. She's frustrated with the position she's in.
Yes.
And when people get frustrated, the stalker's like, if I had the confidence, I would kill the director for making me feel so exploited. And so he is the psychological extreme of the strong emotion she feels,
Mhm.
and they act as counterparts.
Yeah.
If you are to fall too far on the spectrum, you become this.
Yeah. It.
And they play off each other until probably a certain point. Most media, there's been media that's done that in the past, and I'm
Okay.
just taking a gander, but
It talks about fame in an interesting way of like because of this yandere.
yonder.
Yandere.
Yandere. I agree, but then he also starts to kind of be like, well, I've done all this other things for you. Why aren't you going to like put out? Because he starts to gain quote unquote more confidence
Yeah.
to try to
Pursue her.
pursue her. But like, even if you look up the stalker from this movie, he's drawn
Gross.
gross. Like his eyes are made to look.
They draw it like that. They do it on purpose. It's supposed to be like
Yeah,
that.
he's intentionally made to be
Mm-hmm.
look weird. God, there's so many things about this movie that I want to talk about because the ending and the reveal of something is so smart and like makes so much sense.
Is there any way you can
No,
epitomize
Okay,
without actually saying what
I
it is?
can't.
A lot of Japanese movie endings.
I would agree. I
And
would
like
agree
that-
from what I've
So you
viewed
can't
myself.
you can't like verbally be like it does this. You're like I don't. It ends.
Can
you know.
spoil it and cut it so that we can understand a comment?
I'm not gonna spoil it because I love this movie and I think that everybody should go into it. I will say this: trigger warning. There are some scenes of on-set assault and then, unfortunately, real assault.
I would say be careful in foreign media in general.
See, that-
Sometimes they are
yeah.
much more comfortable with
Foreign-
showing that on screen.
Foreign
than-
horror media is often a lot more graphic than American
European.
media
Or
or
European
European media allows it to be.
Correct.
So especially animated media because you can get away with a lot more. So when
Yeah.
going into movies like Perfect Blue,
That's
please be aware of the trigger warnings for gore and other unsavory actions towards fake or real characters. People.
We mentioned Nijimara holograph on
Yeah.
a previous version of the Graveyard Shift.
Yeah.
That also falls in line with the psychological horror aspect. While there is like a
Ghost.
quote unquote ghost or monster aspect to it, there is a lot of psychological damage that is caused throughout that. And while it is an awesome story with a very unique perspective on telling one, be careful indulging in it because it can be difficult to read at times.
I only say this stuff because, like, I remember going into this film because a friend recommended it to me because she was like, "Oh, this film is so beautiful. It's so well animated, and it's really fucked up and dark." And I was like, "Okay, let me go watch this." And I watched it in my room, and I started watching it, and then those scenes came on, and I was like, "Oh, just be careful." But the movie is really good. It has inspired so many other things, and the director himself. If you want to look it up, please do. He also did the film Paprika, which was also a huge inspiration on Inception. That is all the film stuff. So we're going to do something that we usually don't do on either on The Graveyard Shift or on $1 Million Media. We're actually going to be talking about a video game real quick.
It's a
Yes.
it's a multimedia franchise. So it's a video game. It's
they
a
made
movie.
a movie based on the video game.
And there's also a
it's
manga.
incredibly
Yeah.
popular.
Is there
It's
an
the
anime too?
easiest way to put it.
No.
I think I've seen the anime.
You might have seen. I don't know. It's over multiple media.
It's Corpse
ways.
Party. We're talking about
Yeah.
Corpse
Yeah, we're
Party.
coming to Corpse Party. Do you know
Sorry.
what Corpse Party is?
No.
Do you want
This
me
is
to,
all you guys.
Do you want me to explain it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Please do. I've been
so-
explaining all this shit.
So
It is an anime.
since Max is not all that well known with Corpse Party, I'm gonna explain it. Hi, I'm Nox. Anyway, I can't explain a lot throughout the whole thing because we'll talk about that. But so Corpse Party is a multimedia franchise. It is a Japanese-based storyline, and I'm gonna talk about the game mainly. But how it starts off in every part of media, I believe, is a group of high schoolers are celebrating their friend leaving them and going somewhere else, moving away. To doing that, they do like what they believe to be a good luck charm. Yeah. Oh, anyway, that makes sure that they'll be friends forever. Ta-da-da, wow. They do it wrong, and it transports them to not hell, but an older,
alternate universe.
it transfers them to more to an alternate dimension.
A pocket dimension.
A pocket dimension. It transports them from their high school to elementary school that used to be where their high school was and was torn down for the reasons you will find out in the media.
It's very emblematic of J-horror.
Yes, it very much
You'll
is.
see it pictured a lot in old school houses from like around World War II era
Yes.
post.
And
Keep in mind the setting, just for context of what's described.
oh, you won't forget the setting
Right.
because this is not going to be spoiling it because you actually across these characters throughout the whole series. The pocket dimension, the school, is haunted by how many?
There's gotta be more than.
There is more than 3, but there's only 3 children. So the background of the school is a bunch of kids went missing, and due to other circumstances that will spoil the thing, and they ended up dying, and due to them not being found, they
Due to the transportation
Mm,
into this dimension.
No.
No,
So when it was in elementary school, kids went missing. Because said kids went missing, the school got shut down.
Yeah.
Because the school got shut down, the school got torn down,
And the high school.
and the high school was put on top of it.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
the kids are angry because they were murdered,
And
buried
never,
near on the school grounds, I think, and were never found because it immediately got ripped up, and everyone's digging everywhere. There's been
Yeah.
shifted dirt.
You should
everywhere.
watch the Graveyard Shift episode where we talk about how a lot of J-horror has to do with
Schools.
not so much malevolent ghosts, but also the fact that
Displaced
most
Yes.
J or Asian sphere ghosts are not so much malevolent, but lost. But the
Yeah.
lost part is the bigger thing here. They were never found. They didn't get their righteous retribution, their proper honorable burial. Therefore, they're still wandering the plane that these people
And they're
exist
it's
on.
fucking
not-
pissed.
It is
Right.
not that they were
It's
never
really right,
found.
because
Good
it's
plug.
lost.
Thank
They
you.
were.
They
Good
were.
plug.
It is not that they were never found. What was happened was they were found, and the person prosecuted was the wrong person.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought they were never found.
No, they were found. Oh,
15 endings, guys.
Yeah, so the first game has a large amount of endings that you can
15.
get by doing it right, doing it wrong, doing it right in the wrong way, or doing it wrong in the right way. I'm not even joking you. That's what happens. But the psychological aspect of this, and why it's in this thing, is because when these students... Sorry, I meant podcast. I got forgot the word. Is when these high school kids and a middle school kid, who is one of their little sisters, and their teacher, gets transported to the school. They get transported to... For me to explain... I have to explain this because when you play this game, you won't even know what it is until you think about it. They get basically split into groups and transported to the same school at different points in time. It's like when you're in Adobe Photoshop and you have layers and you smush them all together. So they're in different places at different times.
A
all the time.
multi-dimensional plane where there's a layered environment.
Yes.
So like
Yes.
1931, 1933,
No.
1943 could be, the groups are all separated between the three areas of the school in the timeline. I'm
Yeah.
only
I
emphasizing
got
the
you.
timeline. Those years may not be exact, but the timeline is important because at that point in time, a different surrounding situation can be
They could
occurring.
be in the same room and not see each other.
Right, because they are in technically different
Different time.
timelines in the same
Yeah.
dimension.
And go
And
ahead.
they could be in the same room, but the room looked drastically different for
Yes.
both. Because in the game, a lot of times, depending on where you are, there are like earthquakes and shit
Yep.
that break apart the school that make
Yep.
it impossible to walk through in one period of time. But in the other period of time, you can easily walk through. And it's,
Yes. And while they are trying to get out and find each other and get back to their friend group and get out of there, they start dying because these kids are not the happiest with their situation. But the biggest
some
psychological
psychotic
horror of it is because as Kris said, there are multiple psychological breaks to the point of, without spoiling most of it, one of the kids dies in a certain way. And one of the other students who had a crush on her
Ooh.
is going insane, and he knows he's going insane, so he's taking pictures of corpses to keep him sane. He takes a picture of her corpse not knowing it's her, and so later on when he looks at it, he sees a signifier that says it was her. Kind of freaks the fuck out. A lot. Really bad.
Also, I should say, in between the two different timelines, sometimes the bodies will shift into a different timeline, so that way the others will see them. And
Well,
it just brings more despair to their situation. Because,
yes.
oh my god, here's my lost friend. They're fucking a corpse.
It's
Or
like
they are a fucking corpse.
if someone dies at 7:02 a.m.
Yo.
If someone dies in this spot at 7:02 a.m. in their lair, and someone else's lair happens after 7:02 a.m., when they go past that area, they're going to see that body because they have already died.
So, to explain, there is a layered segment in the same dimension of different years occurring in the school.
Times.
However, the actual events that are occurring, if they leave certain traits, will be transmitted between the layers.
Yes,
So a group in the 1933 layer can see a death in the 1943 layer.
No,
No,
reverse.
No. Reverse.
It has to be in a layer that happened previously.
So
So
if
the
death happens
1933
to-
death could have happened in the 1943
Will show up
when
in
they crossed
1943.
that same
Yeah.
location.
Correct.
Yeah, so basically in
So
one
there's
of
some
those,
shared trauma among the groups,
Some-
even though
there
they're
is-
in a totally different timeline.
There's all
so to
shared
speak.
trauma.
Right.
But like in one of them, this is a small spoiler. One of the deaths is this kid is dragged through into a wall, but obviously by ghosts, and obviously the ghosts can go through, but the person can't, and they're being dragged through so much. Trigger warning. They are completely splatted against the wall
Yeah.
like a bug on a windshield.
And that is one of the least triggering deaths because it
Yeah.
happens so fast.
Yeah. But then you kind of see like the remnants of like a dark spot on that wall as you're walking past it, and the characters are like, "Oh, I wonder what that's from." It's their friend's dead corpse, and they don't realize it's a corpse.
Yeah. Big heads up. A, this does have an anime because I remembered it just now. It is 4 episodes on YouTube. B, when you go into this, whether you go into the anime, the movie, which I hear is very bad, the game or the manga, no matter which media you go into, you need to be prepared. There are deaths we are not talking about because they are so bad
Yeah.
and so mentally jarring. That is the psychological aspect. It's not, the characters aren't just going crazy seeing their friends die. They're going crazy because they can't get out. They're going crazy because they're uncovering the real background of this and being tormented by children.
Yeah.
They are going crazy and causing you, as the person watching, playing, reading, or seeing this, you will lose your mind. Because this is one of the best animes I've ever watched, because I love it to death. But also,
Jesus.
I did not mean that. But also, it is one of the most mentally jarring things, because you will get connected to so many of these characters.
Also, I just remembered.
Yeah.
I fucked up the order of the corpse on the wall.
Don't do that anymore.
Well, no, because someone walks and sees that, like, lump of, like, or thing on the wall, and then later you see the kid die. And I just remember it's in the opposite order.
You
So,
see it.
So it's jarring.
You
Yeah.
in the it's more jarring in the game, because in the game you will cycle between these different people,
Right.
and so you'll see different things. You'll be like, I wonder why that's there. Oh, I wonder why that's there.
And
Oh,
you'll
I
find
see
out
why it's
for
there.
It's a
later
person.
on a different thing,
Mhm.
but it relates very
There's still one
closely
guy
to what
who
you were
takes
speaking of.
pictures of
That's
like,
the one I was talking about. I don't want to say his name.
also, for the Corpse Party franchise, if you're going to start with any of them, make sure you do it in order.
You need to make sure you do it in order, or you will be more lost than you are lost playing the first
Yeah, this
game.
is
because it's
multiple
already broken up
Yeah.
and like the timeline
What-
is already like fractured.
Yeah.
So it's not Fate.
No. So what we
No.
no.
No,
It's not, you
Fate
can
is
just hop
different
in
because it
anywhere.
is 3 completely separate dimensions
Please,
that do
And-
not overlap.
And this will
let's not start.
This
with
is-
Fate. I was just
we won't.
joking.
this is more or less a spoiler.
Yeah.
For the first game, which is why I'm saying it, because it's one.
Yeah.
At the end of the first game, some of them do get out. But you gotta remember, there's not just one game. That's all I'm gonna say about the next few games.
Right.
There's, like,
There's like
4.
4 or 5.
Each of them keep going back, and it gets even wonkier timeline because there's time loops. Like,
Yeah,
small
you'll
spoiler,
have
there are
loops
time
and-
loops, and like you can see the old other characters again.
You better be good with paradoxes, or you are gonna lose your
the
minds.
amount of time paradoxes.
Hey, it's this episode, so I mean, like psychological.
Oh no, this is bad.
I will
Yes.
plug Nijimura Holograph till the day I
Oh
die.
my
yeah.
god!
It is so good. It is so mind-bending. It is such a unique written style that
Mhm.
you don't even realize that the timelines are separate until you get to
Right.
the end. It plays on the same idea of a
I just
multi-layered
thought-
dimension where the same event happens in every dimension, and then the outcome of that is completely
Yes.
split among many different dimensions. That is emblematic of a lot of J
J-horror does that a lot.
in general, where you will experience a lot
No
of
one knows
psychotic,
why.
horror, slasher, gruesome, whatever you want to call it. That
It's just
timeline splitting is, or that isekaiing in a horror sense, so to speak, is
A horror isekai. That's what
a
Corpse
horror
Party is.
isekai is what it is,
But
really.
this is really important. I really do need to say this about Corpse Party, because as someone who's played this game, I need to say this. Because I'm going back to how bad Corpse Party is. Corpse Party is not just people die, people move on. You start off with about 12 to 15 people. I can't remember the exact number.
12.
You end off with 2. And you meet all of them.
The realism immersion is very intense.
Right.
If you can't handle intensity, don't
If you
don't
disassociate...
experience J horror. It is very intense.
So if you want to watch a really good playthrough of Corpse Party, it's kind of old. PewDiePie has a pretty
Kind of?
good playthrough, and I think
Kind of? It's like 7 years old!
yes.
Kind of.
You know what? Don't make me feel older than I am, okay?
No, feel old. It's
You're
like
our
7
age.
And I'm
What do
pretty
you
sure
mean?
Don't even
also
start.
What does
bro.
she mean? You're 19.
Chris, don't
I'm
even
20.
start.
Shush.
Don't even start, Chris.
40
Okay.
PewDiePie.
Both of you-
So yes, there's a lot of people that have played this game. If you don't want to play it, if you want to watch it, it is 4 episodes on YouTube. Those 4 episodes are much easier to get through than playing a game that literally will last you for 10 to 12 hours. But you need to be aware, trigger-wise, I'm saying this to warn you. There is suicide,
Yeah.
there is murder of actual students, there is death of students, and this actually is one that's important to me, and there's death of young children, of like middle school children, and elementary school children in this whole thing. And there is a lot of laceration of corpses.
There's a lot of gruesome.
There's a lot of
details.
gruesome, gory details that could make you disassociate, make you panic, make you have nightmares. If you are not ready for that and you're not prepared for that, do not watch or play or read this. And if you are, but don't want to watch it, watch someone play it. Watch Mark play it. Watch them play it because they play it and they're funny still. And there are some times when even they're like, oh my god. So if you need to take a break when interacting with this media, please do it.
Yes.
Because this screwed me up in middle school.
Going back to my previous suggestion, there is sexual assault, there is murder, there is some very dark, traumatic, like suicidal ideations. There is some very, almost too realistic experiences that occur in Nijimara Holograph. If you can stomach those things, then you'll experience, I think, a very unique and interesting piece of media. If you cannot, please, for your own sanity, don't look into these things. Just experience them through a third party, or if, in the case of my recommendation, Nijimara Holograph, don't read it. Read something maybe a little lighter, maybe more emblematic, something.
Work yourself into this shit.
Me, who doesn't experience a lot of that, even though I do have some trauma that is relatable, I don't experience those things when I ingest media. It was still a lot for me to read in an uncomfortable sense. But it was very rewarding on the other side. I'm not a horror fan typically, but this definitely made me enjoy some of the more foreign horror that we can experience.
So yeah, this has been great. I love this podcast. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Corpse Party, yeah, definitely recommend it. Watch something a little lighter first, or play something a little lighter first. Definitely.
Play Kirby.
No.
You have to play something horror-esque.
I recommend the manga's Happiness, dark, very rough themes. If you can get through Happiness, you can probably get through Corpse Party.
Don't eat while playing it.
Yeah, don't eat. Yeah,
don't.
No, just take that as a rule for all J-horror. Just don't have anything that can make you queasy.
Don't consume. Don't consume.
Happiness is very good. Danganronpa might be a good start.
Yes,
to segmenting into something a little more intense like Corpse Party, where it has some of the themes but not as gruesome.
And if you like certain characters, don't
get emotionally attached to characters.
Good recommendation for all J media, period.
Yes,
you will get sad.
One good anime recommendation is Another. It is only 12 episodes.
Don't get too attached.
And it is only 12 episodes. They're kind of gory, but they're not as bad as Corpse Party. So that's a really good anime that I enjoy.
Which one?
Another. Be careful when looking it up because you'll find the movie. The movie is ass. So don't watch the movie. But watch the anime. It's really nice. It might be a little weird, but it's nice. And if you take any medication for psychopathic tendencies, don't play this game. Please don't. Just don't. It has a warning. Don't play this. It literally has a warning. Don't play this game.
For psychopathic tendencies?
It's
I would
cool.
assume.
Well, I feel like that's a good wrap up. I think on that note, we can send it back to Max to clean us up.
Yeah, Max.
Sorry, we're leaving you out.
Shout out to Max.
Yeah.
Our wonderful host.
Our
wonderful host.
Alright, well, I kind of want to bring down the room a bit because we're talking about psychological horror films and the idea of like mental trauma, illness, and everything like that. I only think it's fair that we should talk about if you yourself are going through some harsh times and are not in the best of place, either mentally, physically, or anything like that. I would highly recommend try to go to talk to friends, talk to family, people you feel comfortable with. Also, I just want to say this out loud just to make sure. The National Helpline, the number is 741741, and all you have to do is just text BRAVE, and you'll be talking to a person that can help you out. As someone who has gone through mental illness of myself and everything like that, I think it's very important that, one, we have discussions about this through entertainment, where we can still have a little bit of fun talking about it, but still recognize that it is something that a lot of us do go through. I just wanted to say that real quick because we have been talking about a lot of really heavy subjects. It's a bit of fun, and admittedly a little bit of fun. So yeah, I just want to repeat, if you are going through having any suicidal thoughts or tendencies, the National Helpline is 741741. All right. On that note, I just want to say thank you for listening to The Graveyard Shift. I just want to get everybody say their name one more time before we leave.
All right, Kris here for the third week in a row.
Knox, also known as Alyssa.
Shelldyn.
And Zach.
All right, I've been Max Kellerhalls. If you are listening to this on Wave Radio, please listen to more of our shows. We have a lot of really cool shows that are currently on the air. And are about to come, and a lot of shows that are about to air. Don't want people to quote me on that.
I'm going to quote you on it.
We are all going to quote you on that.
If you are listening to this on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're listening to this on my Spotify, please subscribe to our channel and help support us. And just a big thank you to all if you're listening to this in general. I think this is a really fun show despite this heavy subject matter. But yeah, I hope you all have a great day and please take care of yourself. Goodbye.